I think Dr. K, what you just said now is very powerful. There's a lot of information in there that I really want us to unpack, but I want to focus a bit more on the new context that we find ourselves in. And this new context that has got a mix of generations, a generation that has lived through a life where freedoms have been taken away from you, and yet is living in a life where those freedoms are actually given to you, but they still want more, justifiably so, right? And then there's the generation that hasn't lived in a life where fundamental freedoms have been taken away from them by virtue of their skin color. Freedoms that perhaps I could argue a lot of people in this particular generation take for granted. Freedoms that have to do with the boundaries in which you travel within your own country, the fact that you can speak out against your president freely without anybody storming in your door and taking you into capture. Small freedoms that a lot of people take for an advantage without realizing that you are enjoying these freedoms because of this democratic ideology. And this generation's frustrations, however, are almost not necessarily geared to, if I may argue, to the system of democracy itself, but they are geared to the fundamental failures that a state has done in terms of fulfilling its mandate. And then the big issue that comes in there is the issue of accountability. But because people only think, unfortunately, that the only way you hold a state accountable is by kicking out the government that is running that particular state at that particular time through the periodic elections, people forget that the bigger picture of democracy is that when you have a government that screws up, you have the means to hold them accountable. And I think there's a lacking in civic education specifically on life after elections, life before elections, because those are the lived experiences of democracy that you're talking about, right? Not people sitting and waiting for the next cycle of elections to be like, oh, yeah, this one doesn't work for me, let me kick them. Not to say that elections aren't important, but elections also happen in countries that don't have democracies. So if anything, I'd argue that elections are actually not even that important when it comes to a democracy. It's what happens in between that. And this is where I kind of want to bring in civil society, right? We know the basics of politics, that society is divided up into three. There's the market, there's the state, and there's civil society. And oftentimes the problems that people have are related to the market, are related to the state, but rarely do people realize that agency comes from the space of civil society. If a country has a weak civil society, the power is then distributed unfairly to the state, unfairly to the market, and people feel like they don't have a voice. Similarly to when, if civil society has all the power, there can be a bit of an issue, because then you have civil society taking care of mandates that are supposed to be fulfilled by the state, which is an issue in a lot of countries that have got human rights matters, right? But the ideal is supposed to be that the power is distributed evenly amongst the three. And the big proponent that civil society plays is to have that lived experience in a democracy, is to provide that agency to people after the elections, going into the elections, and before the elections. And now I just want to bring DDP into that space. In terms of this 30-year engagement that we've had, what has been the impact our organization had in terms of fulfilling and upholding the tenets of what it means to be part of civil society?
Great. In terms of the impact of the work that DDP has had, especially with relation to civil society, There are several of them, but I would just pick up 4 or 5 that are very notable. One of them is the continuation of creating spaces for strengthening robustness in terms of advocacy work. This has been at the center of our messaging and our practice as an organization to ensure that civil society remains awake to this call. It's really a call, because without the vigilance that I've been speaking previously about, the civil society will be so weakened to the extent that it cannot be able to influence the discussions and the policy formulation processes at the state and the private sector level. We have to have a coordinated and very much connected civil society at different levels of societal existence. That is at the level of community, at the level of regions, and at the national level. And DDP has partners across all these levels wherever we find ourselves, because we believe in a collective voice and we believe in a shared vision that is also principled by the values and the norms that we want to create as a collective civil society. So that's the first part of our impact. We have continuously generated networks of civil society, helped and be part of. We don't have necessarily to be the face of these levels of coordination. There are some that we are the face as the organization, but we also, in many others, a contributor or a supporter of a collective national or provincial network or civil society organizations that are really advocating for better life, for good governance, for promotion of the rule of law, but also for strengthening civil society participation in political life of the country. Secondly, we celebrate the idea that through our citizen political education, we continually seeing many of our constituents in different communities and other spaces, ordinary citizens gaining confidence to stand up and articulate their views without having fear or self-doubt. They have this level of confidence because it's informed by education. That is where our civic education comes in, because we believe an informed citizen is a courageous citizen. One is able to articulate their aspirations without fear because they know what they are saying. The opposite is true. If you have a person or an individual who's just passionate about active participation in political life, but do not have information, they're not able to articulate the aspirations that are really supported by the wider public, because whatever these individuals may be speaking are really contrary to what people think should galvanize support. So we constantly educate our citizens through our various activities and programming to ensure that they are informed to stand up wherever they find themselves in, that they're able to notice malfeasance wherever they see it, B, that they are able also to provide solutions and be part of the solutions, or not just troubleshooting. And thirdly, that they are willing to be accountable. Don't just stand up and say something without committing to what you should do as an individual citizen, as a civil society organization, as an agency of government, whoever the person may be. We ensure that whilst we are very, very passionate in holding our leaders accountable, we must also hold ourselves accountable. Whatever we say publicly, we must also be willing to be held accountable for what we stand for. And that's very important as part of our democracy education, because it's not just a platform for shouting. It's a platform for accountability. It's a platform for providing solutions and working with those who are willing to work with you in making those solutions realizable. Thirdly, our work has been in our elections and democracy education, where we constantly work throughout the electoral cycle, pre-elections, during elections, and post-elections. As you correctly intimated, it's very important that we do not see elections as an event. And so we wait until when we are going to vote again. That's when we are showing up. It's what we do in between one election and the other that really counts when the election time comes in, so that we are able to also make informed decisions at the ballot box, so that we're also knowing what we are voting for and what we are voting against. All those decisions have to be made before the election time, and that is not what most people understand about elections. I get this kind of questions: why are you continuing to talk about elections, and the elections is 5 years to come? because it's what you do with this time between an election that affects what you do at the ballot box when the election time comes in. So our impact in that area of our work is that we have continuously engaged our citizens, our communities, and everyone who participates in that process, including our partnership with the Independent Electoral Commission, in ensuring that our citizens remained informed continuously to make better decisions at the ballot box, and they don't get confused when political campaigning seasons come, because they're gonna get to hear all kinds of things that they might be enticed with gifts. But if they know why they're doing what they're doing as responsible agencies of democracy, then they're able to make decisions that are helpful. The fourth area of our work, of course, is working with political parties themselves, strengthening their engagement with civil society and with citizens, and helping and working together in shaping how political messaging can contribute to strengthening democracy and not tearing it apart. And fifth part, and lastly but not least, of course, is working with the different constituencies of marginal populations, that is women, youth, and migrants, to continually engage everyone involved in that space in their work with us in deepening this democracy, their role in it, and of course, elevating their voices so that they can be heard, because as vulnerable populations, they are often relegated to the periphery when it comes to decision making, to policy making processes, and all the like. And so we work with this constituency to make sure that they are recognized, that they are available, they are present, but they also their voices do matter, and they need to be listened to.
Before I let you go, Dr. K, one of the most exciting questions to ask at this point, especially after a person has just articulated their vision, their work, is what can we expect this year from DDP? 30 years it's a big celebration. I think some people's marriages don't even last that long. So it's great. And I'm so happy that we're part of this journey, but what can people expect for this year?
Great. We have lined up a series of very big events. Firstly, we are offering 6 conferences that do articulate our visions in the different programming areas. And therefore, one way of we're going to be celebrating is we're celebrating our 30 years through these activities, honoring individuals, organizations, and partners that have worked with us for the 30 years in promoting that specific area of work. And secondly, we are also convening different dialogues in communities, since we cannot be able to convene everyone in a central place. So we are also having these celebratory dialogues in different communities throughout the Greater Durban Metro and in KZN in particular. And we have 2 or 3 national engagements, one happening this month, and there are 2 others following up in the latter part of the year, where we're also engaging the national partners in one of these conversations that really look into the way we've traveled together with them as partners in deepening democracy. So we would like to encourage everyone to follow us on our social media platforms to be able to see where we are at the different space, engage with the content that we're putting out there. We are also collecting different stories of change at the moment with all these partners that we've worked with. So there'll be a lot of sharing of snippets of individual experiences from our partners, what they have experienced, what they have learned working with us, and where they foresee us going together as a collective, because DDP is just a convener of these gatherings, but we are pointing to a greater vision. What we are really interested in collectively is that through our work, we are able to create a society where the values of democracy are espoused, embraced, and celebrated continuously, and seeing individual citizens and their communities co-creating communities filled with hope and possibilities. And we believe if all of us can be able to do our bit, wherever we are found, we are going to create a society, South Africa, that people are feeling hopeful about, and we are able to go past the challenges that we constantly see, because it does not mean the challenges will stop. The challenges will always be there. But when we are alive to our role and responsibilities as citizens and a civil society sector, we can co-create a society filled with hope and possibilities. That's our dream.
Right, everybody, you heard it all right here, that this is a big and busy year for the democracy development program, but you can also be a part of it. If you're not in the Durban region and you can't join our events in person, no worries. Almost 99% of our events are available online. You can catch them live on Zoom or live on YouTube. But as Dr. K mentioned, kindly follow us on our social media pages, which all of its links are attached to the podcast details below. But follow us on our social media pages to know exactly the dates of when we're having these events. And you yourself can also participate. And if you are in the Durban region, please come through. Everyone is welcome. Come participate. Come share your voice. This is what DDP is all about. We will never turn you down unless you're not qualified necessarily to come to the event, but that's not often. That only has to do with fundraising things. But most of our events, everybody and anybody is welcome to come and share their perspectives. Dr. K, thank you so much for this conversation. I truly do appreciate it. And to everybody that is listening at home, thank you very much for joining in. To everybody watching on YouTube, thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. Exciting times ahead for DDP Season 2. Many incredible guests are planned for us to have conversation with, covering all topics. Some of them are going to go into a bit more of the hard things that maybe we might be shying away from issues that have to do with the electricity crisis, the road to the 2024 elections, to even what it means for you as a citizen and the future of coalition governments in South Africa. A lot of hard questions that we're going to be tackling in this season. Stay tuned, and I cannot wait to see you all and to speak to you all again in the next episode. Thank you.